Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cash That. This is your host Joe Delara, and we've got a very special episode for you today, and it's brought to you once again by our good friends at props.cash. You guys know those red charts, those green charts, you know the hit rates, you know that we use those every single day, especially when we're betting on props. You can use it for different analysis, you can use it for projections, you can see how the matchup is, how other players have fared in a similar matchup. And you can get that all for 25% off with your first month with code Delara25. You can absolutely become a better player prop better, especially as we transition from NFL season for a lot of you to maybe being NBA focused for the rest of the season. So it's one of those tools if you're going to be using it every single day because the NBA plays every single day. So you guys are going to want to check that out. But we've got a very special guest for you today. Obviously, we have producer Corey in studio, but we have prop bet guy. We have Doug. How you doing, man? It's a pleasure to have you on. I'm excited to do this episode.
What's up, Joe? Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Big fan, and ready to talk some hoops.
Yeah, dude, it's gonna be a blast. So I know a lot of people, I'm sure, because like everybody, like before we kind of get into talking hoops and like talk some of our best bets, I think that I always see you. You got the logo on Twitter. Like I know you've been like one of those like the OGs, basically like putting out picks. And I think it's nice that like all of your content's really like it's just out there. Like when you put out a bet, like it's out there. So you're not a paywall guy, which is kind of nice. So I do think it's kind of interesting because it's like how did you wind up getting started in the space? I think that it's like how did you decide you were just like I'm good at this, I'm gonna start tweeting about it, or like what how did it kind of work out?
Yeah, I always laugh when people call me an OG in this space. I think it's only been 4 years, which I mean, it does feel like a long time, but 4 years isn't that relative to anything else, not that long of a time. But yeah, how I got started. It's been a very long time for how I've kind of refined my overall process. I mean, way back when I was betting spreads, I was betting totals, and I realized that I love props. I genuinely like them better. I like watching those bets play out more than I like watching spreads and totals. Um, and then I also just found that I'm better at it. I think there's definitely more edges with props. Spreads and totals; those are looked at with the most scrutiny by sports books, and props are too now because they're super
Yeah.
popular. But at the same time, you could always find an edge, especially when there's just so many props available. But yeah, I was just a guy on Twitter like everyone else way back in 2019, and I was looking around. I was following some bigger accounts, and they're really just just like putting out plays with no rationale and pumping themselves up when they win and
Yeah.
not saying anything when they lose and not being transparent and all that. So, and I said to myself, like, you know what? I think I can make a name for myself doing this. I think I could tweet out some plays and actually give people a rationale. And I'm not seeing too many people just focusing on props. So that's kind of
Hey,
how Prop Bet Guy was born.
that's awesome. It's quite the birth
Yeah.
there, and we didn't use stork or anything, so not bad. But it
Right.
is it is a cool start, and I think that it's definitely like one of those like niche areas. But now it's like you said, it's becoming a lot more mainstream. Like when you come in and like you look at this like from a process perspective, like what background are you? Like what do you bring? Like what are you bringing in? Because like I'm a lawyer, producer Corey's a lawyer, which is like not really like a math oriented thing, right? Like maybe I can write, but it's not a math thing. So like what kind of background are you bringing in that kind of gives you like a unique edge or a unique view on the way that you look at bets and the way that you approach betting?
Yeah, so I'm a numbers guy through and through. I work in, without getting into too much detail, I work in corporate finance. I'm in Excel all day for my real job, for this, for everything. I even have, my house budget set up in Excel. Like I'm in Excel all day, every day, and I love it. I love it. I'm one of those nerds who I love looking at stats. I love looking at numbers. I love dumping data into Excel and toggling through to find trends and whatnot. So I think I do have a keen eye for figuring out, trends and seeing, what's working, what's not working.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just in general, like, I mean, ever since I was a little kid, I was looking at the box scores in the newspaper propped up on my cereal box, whatever I was eating that morning. So like, I love stats, man. I love numbers.
No, and I think that that's huge, right? Because like it gives you like a real analytical approach. It's not like, oh, like I just feel this way. So, and it's like if
Mhm.
you like, I don't know what your favorite sport to cap is, but like I love watching basketball. So like I think to me it's the easiest sport for me to cap. Do you have like a favorite one that you like, or like even a favorite league? Because I know basketball. I know you do college, you do NBA. Is there like a favorite spot or a favorite sport that you really like to cap?
Yeah, I mean, basketball is my favorite sport. Like in general, still play it, love it. And in terms of capping it, I mean, I love betting every day, man. I love the thrill of it. So
Yeah.
when we're in like the middle in the grind of the NBA season, I know there's highs and lows, but I would definitely still say NBA is definitely my favorite.
Yeah, hell yeah. So I
Yeah,
think that
yeah.
it's so important, right, with NBA to like you have so much information, you have so many games, and like there's so much stuff that you can kind of pour over, and like everybody kind of uses like different tools or different things. And like I know that you mentioned that you're a numbers guy, you like to kind of dump everything into your own stuff. And I noticed like when you put out plays, which is different than what some other people do, you know, a lot of times you'll say like I have this closer to X, or you know like I would take this to a particular number. Like tell me about that. Like how do you do that? Like is it something that you're coming up with like yourself, or are you kind of like aggregating, or like is it something that like an you know, is it just something that you're like, I don't know how to, it's kind of obnoxious to explain it on a word by word basis, but you know, it's like, look, this is my background process. Like, trust me, I'm the numbers guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not just like throwing out darts with the numbers. Like I do have a very baseline projection process that I go through, but it's not something that I personally swear by. So I'll do the projections. I'll kind of try to identify a play first,
Yeah.
based on trends and what splits I'm looking at, and trying to weight different splits more than others. I mean, as
Yeah.
that's kind of all NBA is trying to figure out what splits matter in every single matchup that we're looking at. And then at the end, just to kind of give myself some sort of sanity check, I'll do a very baseline projection for the game, just to make sure that like I'm not out of whack in terms of the math on it when I'm
Yeah.
comparing it to the analytical trend, if that makes
No,
sense.
that totally makes sense, because I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things like if you're looking at it even just like loosely, and you're like, well, there's this many possessions, they have this type of usage, like this is kind of what they average, like this is the pace they normally play at. Those are
Mhm.
all tools and like things that you can kind of look at, and it's like, all right, like I understand why this play like is hitting so much or it's not hitting so much, and like, but in this particular matchup, I do like it. What a like I guess like my question too is honestly like I can only cap NBA. Like when I cap it, it's like that's the only thing that I can focus on, because I'm like that's like I'm ingrained in it. Like that's all I'm thinking about, and it's just like you know, like sometimes like at different points of the season, like I can take some time and be like, at the beginning of the year, I can look at NFL because there's not NBA, or like in the summer, I can look at pitcher props. Like, how do you? I don't understand how you juggle them all, because like I see you like firing stuff off. It's like it'll be NFL, NBA, college basketball on the same day. Like, how do you do it? Like when you have all those things going on at the same time.
I don't really know, to be honest with you. It's a lot of time management, man. It really is. I mean, look, basketball's every day, but different parts of the year, cyclically. Sorry, that's a tough word to say.
Mhm.
Like with NFL, I know like during the regular season, start checking on Wednesday and Thursday because that's when the openers are going to start firing out. Basketball, just look, every spare chance I get, which isn't as much as you probably would think based on how many plays and the times that I'm tweeting, but I'm just trying to stay ahead. And if I can't, then I can't. And sometimes it does result in me tweeting out a play 2 minutes before tip off, which I hate doing, but I'm
Yeah.
trying to stay transparent. And I want people to know how I'm betting, what I'm betting, and every day. But it's a lot of time management.
Yeah,
It's a
dude.
lot. It's a lot to
Like
stay on top of everything.
I feel like when I'm driving a lot of times, like, or like I'm in the shower and like I'll be like thinking about something, or like while I'm waiting online for something, and I'll be like, huh, like I wonder what's going on here. Like I'm thinking about the play, or like I'm thinking about like an angle. You know, it's like I'll look at the slate and
Mhm.
be like, these are my matchups. And it's like, huh, like I think like this might be a good spot for so and so. And then like I can't really dive in front of my computer until later in the day. Like do you it's kind of it sounds kind of fucked up, but like do you find yourself just like at random points of the day, it's like I'm just thinking about how like some of the angles that I want to attack later. And like when I do get a chance, like I hope the numbers where I want it to be, because this is kind of the way my brain is thinking right now.
For sure, man. For sure. I mean, like, look, when I'm not working, um, my brain, like, it's hard to separate yourself sometimes. You're
Yeah.
always thinking you want to be ahead, and look, this betting props is not what it was a few years ago, where like if I'm thinking about a play, I'm not really worried about the line moving. Like I'm chilling. But like if there's an edge out there, someone's gonna find it. So if you
Yeah.
think you found an edge, you kind of got to get it out. And
I
maybe you're not
know.
by your computer. It does get tough, but
Y-
that's kind of what I love it. That's kind of why I love it. There's just a huge rush, and it's a competitive space, not with each other, but just to like identify that edge before the prop gets priced out.
Yeah, like it's kind of like a rush. Like if you tweet out a play or you post a play in the action app, and then like you got it at -110, and then 3 seconds later it's like -150, and you're like, this. It's like it kind of feels cool that like you have like a certain degree of influence to be able to do that. But then at the same time, like I feel bad sometimes because I'm like, it like the play. Like, it's like you had to have my notifications on, otherwise you just did not get that play. Like it just got totally nuked.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I struggle with it from a content perspective, and you do too. I think, like unless you're betting on a superstar, if you're betting on a role player and you give out a prop, like that thing is gone. It's good. Like the second you hit send, it's done. It's like it's absolutely cooked.
Hmm.
Do you like? Do you really worry about it too much, like in terms of like a content thing, or are you really just like, look, these are the best plays. I'm gonna give them out. I hope you can get the line, but otherwise, like like I'm sorry, but like sometimes you can't get them all.
I try to be as user friendly as possible. So as much as I'd like to like have the mindset that you just said, where like I'm just like kind of just sending it off to the editors and just kind of chilling, and whatever the lines are when I post are the lines. That's not me. I'm trying to to help people, and I want people to, if they like the play that I put out and they like my analysis, I want them to be able to tail. So I mean, it does get very dicey from a content perspective when you're publishing props, because when the content's out of my hands and with the editors, I'm like just checking the phone, I'm checking DraftKings, I'm refreshing, I'm making sure that line is not changing substantially. And
Yeah.
the editors are fantastic, and they're working as quick as they can, and I know they are, but sometimes like there's just nothing we can do. So
Yeah,
I,
like
I
I
it's
yeah,
tough, man.
and you're good about it too, because I know like a lot of times you'll post like this is widely available, or I'm on FanDuel, I'm on DraftKings, and I think that like your following so big, like I think that that does actually make a difference, because just the way the computer algorithms are, like I always think about it, it's like funny because people look at it and they're like, oh, like this was super sharp, like you moved the line. I think a lot of times like yeah, like it is, you are being sharp, but at a certain
Mhm.
point it's like the books have liability, like it's all automated. So it's like if you have a shitload of action on one prop, like it's going to get either taken down, it's going to be like they're going to move it because they have to. Do you like, are there ever times where you're like, it's like where you're modeling it and you're like, well, my margin's thin, or like I like you can't really take it past this point. And I like, it's something I try to talk to the followers about too, and I'm like, look, if I bet it at -110 and I give it out at -110, and the line moves to -150, or like it changes from like 7.5 to 8.5, like a lot of times I'm like, it's not the same bet, especially, and I think the part is like, especially when the juice moves, because like I always look at the implied probability of it. Like how much do you like factor that in? Like I guess like when you're betting on it, it's like, look, like I like the hit rate, but at this number, it's no good anymore.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's a big part. It really is. I mean, when you're dealing with higher quantities like Shea Gilgis Alexander points, which is, in the low 30s,
Yeah.
it's different. Like, a play at 30 and a half for me is usually also a play at 31 and a half.
Yeah.
But like you said, like, for example, last weekend with Lamar Jackson's rush attempts, which did not work out well for me, but I got it at 9.5 and immediately moved to 10.5. And people were like, do you like it at 10.5? Like, I want to say yes, but I don't.
Yeah.
If the line opened at 10.5, it wouldn't have been a play for me, because the jump between 9.5 and 10.5 is huge.
Yeah.
It's 11%. So it gets tough when, when these lines move like that, especially the lower quantities.
Yeah.
Strikeout props, especially, it's the same thing, because when you have low quantities, like the juice in the line really does matter a lot more than, a Gilgis Alexander points prop.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that
Yeah.
that's always one of the things that's like hard for people to like understand or like kind of comprehend, because it's just like that one, this moving the one stat is really significant. But then like people kind of forget it's like moving the juice does matter, because like you have to hit this then way more often than I have to hit it at -110 if you're hitting it at -150. And I noticed one of the ways that you have started, you've done it like a little bit throughout like different seasons, like you'll do some like little same game parlays, I've noticed. So it's like you'll do a guy for the like instead of their line being like 15 points, you'll get them to like 12, and then you'll say like, and then somebody else's rebounds. What's your like process with doing that? I don't personally do that a lot, but I understand the value in it. What's your process for like crafting those basically?
It's a great question. And it's fun. I laugh every time someone asks me about parlays, because I was like Mr. Anti parlay,
Yeah.
Mr. Straight prop bet guy for forever. And then I started diving in. I was like, oh, there could be some value here. But look, when you project a game, it's not just one projection, really. I mean, you should look at it as a range of projections over, 1,000, a million, however many times you run the quote unquote simulation. And there are some times where I think if a guy's line is, say, Jared Allen to score 17 points, well, you know what? That's not a play for me. But more often than not, I do have him getting to 14 or 15 points. And I
Yeah.
do have him getting to 10 rebounds, but I don't have him getting to the 13 or 12 rebounds that his initial line has. So I do sometimes think there's value, and it's based on how, each book prices those
Yeah.
tranches. I have a value that I come up with for these little two leg parlays that I do. And if the books are giving me a better price, then I'll usually fire on it. So it's not necessarily like if I play Jared Allen, to score 14 points and get 10 rebounds, that doesn't necessarily mean that I like his straight point line of 16 and a half or his straight rebound line of 11 and a half. Like, I play those for a reason. I'm not just, dummying down the line because it looks better, if
Yeah,
that
and I
makes
think
sense.
no, I think
Yeah.
that's a fucking great point, because you see it
Mhm.
all the time. Like you see a lot of ladder challenges, you see a lot of builder, like quote unquote builders, and like I hate them, because like I don't think they're either a like correlated. I think that there used to be times like with the same game parlays when they first came out, especially like a lot of times you could create a correlated parlay, and it wasn't, the lines weren't like adjusting for the fact that it was correlated. So it was like if I liked somebody's assist and I noticed that like that person's assist like always assisted to a particular player, and I wanted to bet that player's points at like lower numbers, like that could be an angle. But like, and I feel like those weren't being factored in. But I think that now, like especially if you're picking plays from like random games, and you're like, well, like so and so is going to score 20 points, and then this guy's going to score 15 points, and this guy's going to get 4 rebounds, and this guy's going to get 6 assists. It's like you kind of get way out of line with just exactly how much like the variability can be in those things. And like when you start adding more and more plays, like you start adding more variance, like there's more potential for injury or like anything. So I think that at least with the two leg parlay, it kind of sounds like you've been able to target it in a particular way where it's like, look, I understand that there's more variance in a way because there's two different props, but when I run my models, it's hitting at a much higher clip than the way it's being priced.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of that is with the NBA specifically is blowouts.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm giving a line that I think a guy can hit in three quarters, to save us from not needing a fourth quarter if it is a blowout. And as we know, blowouts are everyone's favorite thing in the NBA, especially, this is blowout season right before the
Yeah.
All-Star break. Teams are starting to pack it in a little bit. So yeah, you hit it right on the head. It's kind of phasing and looking at it from that perspective as opposed from just the straight line.
All right, awesome. So with that, let's kind of get into what we're looking at for the Wednesday NBA slate. We got a bunch of like really good games. I think that honestly, one of the games that I'm most interested in right now, from a betting perspective, there's a couple. We got and I'll start with the Kings and the Heat because it just comes earlier in the day. So I'll do it first. The Kings are 1 point road underdogs in Miami. And I think this is a pretty good game. I think that there are two teams that are interestingly rated in the league, right? Like I think that both teams are somehow both underrated and overrated, like simultaneously a lot of the times. And it's like a weird thing to balance. But I do think that like this line seems to be moving around a little bit. There's the Kings are underdogs on one site, they're favorites on another site. So I think that with when you're looking at the line, you're like, this shouldn't be a blowout, but like you never really know. Is there a particular matchup, in this game that you think is interesting or compelling that you might want to tackle from like a player prop perspective? Like we have Fox, we have Bam, we have Sabonis, we have Hero, we have Rozier now, and Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, I think, two come to mind. One would be Fox's under. I think right now, what is it? We got 25 and a half.
25 and a half. Yeah.
I think that could get tempting if maybe one book hangs at 26 and a half. I know he's averaging like 27, so it does like organically seem too low for him, but pick and roll against Bam. I mean, I don't know if you really need to say more. That's a tough matchup, and their rotations really align. They both come out midway through the first quarter. They both play the majority of the second quarter. Same thing in the second half. Fox, unless he starts raining threes, but his jumper hasn't looked great lately. He's been pretty streaky. So, a road game against a team that's going to really want to try to slow the Kings down as much as possible and not let them get out in transition. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm hoping for 26 and a half, but that might be a play on his under.
Yeah, I'm with you. Cause like at first I was looking at this, I was like, he's hit this in 67% of games, but I know their point of attack defense isn't the best, but I think what your point is like a little bit more nuanced where it's like, yeah, but it's not really like, he's not just running at you. Like he's not just going to shake you on the perimeter. Like it's a lot of pick and roll with Sabonis, which means you're going to get attacked by Bam. And then honestly, like over the last 15 games, kind of like you said, he's only averaging 23.3 points per game. So there's definitely been a downturn recently, whereas at like the beginning of the season, he was just automatic on this number. You just couldn't miss. I definitely get the appeal there. I think you're right, though. I think that this is probably a line that's going to get hit by the public, to be honest, because you're going to look at it and be like, it's too low, 25 and a half, too low. And then maybe we can get a 26 and a half by the time, this podcast drops, by the time you guys listen. So definitely an angle. I'm curious to know your thoughts on this play that I was looking at, because obviously Terry Rozier got introduced to the Miami Heat within the last week. One of the things, and like everybody's like, well, like that's a lot. It's a lot of on ball. It's a lot of usage. It's a lot of, it's a lot of offense, obviously, that he can kind of provide. How does that impact some of these other guys like Bam, Jimmy, but especially in my opinion, and, Tyler Hero, because they do seem to be slightly I don't want to say redundant, but similar in terms of what their skill set is, their shot profile, like whatever. The play I was looking at, and I don't normally like threes, but I was looking at Tyler Hero over 3.5 threes. It's about -110, like across the market. He's over in 4 of 5 with Terry Rozier. He's taken 9, 6, 10, 11, and 12 attempts. So 9.6 per game on 16 total field goal attempts per game. The thing is here, without Rozier, he'd hit this in 57% of games, so still a good hit rate. He was averaging 19 field goal attempts, so so it's about 3 down. But he's actually taking more threes per game now. He's only averaging 8.2, so the proportion's a lot different. He's taking, instead of 43% of his shots from 3-point range, he's taking 60% of his shots from 3-point range. And he's a 40% shooter from 3 this season. I have this at about like 3. If you just applied that, it'd be about 3.88 threes per game. I think that, this spot against Sacramento could be like a decent angle for him, because I feel like Keegan's not going to be on him. That's not like really a matchup for him. Like maybe you're seeing some Barnes, like maybe you're seeing some Herter. So I do think that this is probably like a softer matchup for him. And I know that he made some comments too in the post game last game. He was like, yeah, like I'm doing whatever the team needs me to do. Like I'm taking more threes, like I'm being a little bit more spot up. So I do really like the angle on trying to bet on something that's new in the market for Miami.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you nailed it with how many threes he's getting up in relation to his total field goal attempts. But if you just think about it, you're absolutely right. I mean, they really are. Him and Rozier are redundant in terms of, and not in a bad way, but in terms of they both, are primary ball handlers who like to try to break the defender down and get into the paint. So, Kyle Lowry really wasn't that for the Heat. I mean,
No.
he would kind of, make the first pass and then go either hang in the corner or on the wing and spot up when he could, or maybe get some secondary action. But Rozier's really going to be primary, and they need Hero to space the floor because Jimmy can hit threes, but he doesn't really space the floor. Bam is
Yeah.
Bam. He's going to be in the middle. And then, Haywood Highsmith or Jaime Jaquez, those guys can shoot, but a Hero is really going to be almost like the Duncan Robinson of a few years ago when Duncan
Right.
pre-contract that he got. So I love the play. I think it's a great play. I mean, I do think the Heat are going to try to slow the Kings down, but the Kings play so fast that it is going to be a faster tempo game for the Heat.
Yeah.
So I mean, I like it. I think it's a great look.
All right, word. Yeah, no, it's just it's all relative. So I mean, I guess, and this is a question too, because I talked to Prop Bomb about this, and we had, and like everybody I think has different strategies, right? On like, do you want to attack like a market early, like when there's like when you have less information realistically. So like, when you're looking at some of these props, especially with the trade deadline coming up, because that's happening soon, right? February 8th is the trade deadline. So the next time we drop this podcast is going to be like a day before the trade deadline, for next week's episode. But for you, like when you're looking at teams that have either just made a move or, like maybe they traded somebody away or they got somebody, do you like to try to attack it early based on like what your thoughts are going to be on like the market? Or are you kind of like in the, I want to see, like, I need to see what's happening here before I try to make a decision?
I'm usually more of an attack early type of guy. I mean, I played OG's point prop his first game as a Knick. It
Hell
did
yeah.
not work, or maybe it was the second game. I don't
Second
think it
game.
worked
Yeah.
out very well.
Yeah.
I don't think it worked out very well, but it was a good spot up opportunity for him. And regardless, I think, look, the more data the books get, the sharper the lines are going to get,
Mm-hmm.
as we, trudge on through the season. I love the beginning of the season with the NBA
Yeah. Same.
where you're seeing new, guys in new roles and whatnot. So I think that applies to the trade deadline too, when you get, especially like if star players or like legitimate role players start to get moved. Yeah, I mean, I'm more of an attack type guy, but I mean, there are some instances where like I might be unsure, so I'm not going to force any action. I might want to wait and see, but it's going to be super interesting. I mean, I'm excited to see what happens this trade deadline. I mean, I think more often than not, it's a bit of a letdown, but I do think we'll see some action
I
this
do
time
too,
around.
and we'll kind of get to the
Yeah.
trade deadline a little bit later in the episode too. But I did want to get your thoughts on that, just relevant to this play. A couple other games that I think are really fascinating on this slate. We've got Denver versus Oklahoma City. I personally don't have a play for this yet. We don't have props out for it yet, but the spread is set right now at Denver +2 on the road. Like my initial gut is I'm surprised by this. I do think that it's kind of an interesting schedule spot for Denver. It's not a back to back; they're just on the road. But I do always wonder, right? Like in this type of spot, it's like, does Denver care? Like, do they really care, or is this more of a game for Oklahoma City? Do you have a thought like on the game or like a matchup that you might like be thinking about, even though we don't have any props out for this one yet? I think Denver is still the best team in the league, but Oklahoma City has been like a dynamite force during the regular season.
Yeah. Well, I think, the first thing we got to point out is I'm pretty sure Jalen Williams was already ruled out for tomorrow. So that's pretty big for the Thunder.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see who plays because he's really ascended.
He's really
lately.
good. Really good.
He's one of my favorite players of the season, if not my favorite player to watch. And I mean, he should be in the most improved conversation for sure. Regardless, it's going to be interesting to see who plays second fiddle because Denver does have the pieces I mean, no one can slow down Shea, but I mean, they have KCP. They maybe even Aaron, you might even see Aaron Gordon on him a little bit. They could potentially slow him down. And I mean, Chet has shown obvious flashes. I mean, he's a great player, but that's a tough matchup against Jokic where
Brutal.
he's going to have to be defending him on the other side. I don't know. Who do you think? I mean, who do you think tomorrow is going to be is this a Josh Giddey game? Is this a Isaiah Joe game? Is this a Case and Wallace game? There's just so many players on the Thunder. It's hard to kind of pick this
pinpoint.
rotation apart.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you there, and I think that you're right. Like and what I noticed watching Shea in a couple other matchups is like he's really good, but when there were a couple teams that threw like some doubles at him, some traps at him, and he still can navigate it, but it's definitely like a stressful look for him. And I think it's kind of one of those things where you see, I don't think Denver's going to go out of their way to throw like too many things that they might throw at him in a playoff matchup, but I think there might be some possessions like here and there where they're like, let's try to throw like somebody weird on him. Let's put MPJ on him and see what happens. And then like leave Gordon behind, like in help or something like that, or somebody as a floater. Like, let's just see like what happens here. Or like, can we trap him? Can we do this? And just to kind of see what works. I think that it's going to be even more magnified essentially without Jalen Williams because he is such a good like outlet. And Chet, like as good as he is, he's not a primary scorer. Like he's clearly not that. Like he is a tertiary scorer, secondary scorer at best, at least at this point of his career, which is he's still incredible, but like it's not a knock on him, but it's just, that's not where he is in his career. So for me, like when I look at this, I know Jokic is questionable for this game with some lower back pain. So I think that's kind of where the spread is the way that it is. Denver's so good. Like Denver's so good. I struggle to see them dropping this game if Jokic plays, especially given, like you said, like with Jalen Williams being out. Yeah, I just think it's it's a pretty significant injury that I think is being underrated in the way that the spread seems to be moving or the way that the spread is kind of listed right now.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, you can't act on this game before knowing, whether Jokic is playing or not. But I mean, the way Jamal Murray's playing, like, I'm with you, man. I think Denver's the best team in the NBA. There's no reason they shouldn't be right now. They're the reigning champs. And besides Bruce Brown, they're the same team as last year and they look great. But, I think you kind of hit it on the head in the beginning. It's a question of motive. Like, do they care about this game? I don't know if they do. It's a good point, and that's just something we always have to weigh when we're looking at betting these games and betting props.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the thing too. It's like I think if Jokic plays, like we'll know. It's like, all right, they're trying. Like they're gonna give it a go here. And I think especially the way it's really crazy because the way the standings are, um, all those teams are in the same division. The Minnesota Timberwolves, the Nuggets, and the Thunder are 1, 2, 3 in the West, and they're all in the same division. So it does to me, like I do think that maybe Denver does decide they're like, you know what, we do want to play this game because we want home court in the playoffs, and this kind of could matter for that situation. So it's definitely something that I'm going to keep monitoring, and maybe I'll have some plays for this game in terms of the prop market. But one other game that I definitely do have some props for, and I think is interesting, is the Pelicans versus the Houston Rockets. This is a game where the Rockets started off the season like so strong, and they've kind of faltered lately, and so have the Pelicans as well. The Pelicans are still in 8th; they're 26-21. They've lost 3 in a row though. Houston, they started off so good, but they're down all the way now to 22-24. They're sitting in 11th in the Western Conference, so they're out of the play-in tournament. And it's definitely an interesting spot as well. They're at home, and their home road splits have been so significant. They're 17-8 at home compared to 5-16 on the road. Whereas New Orleans has been pretty even on both the road and at home. Right now, we're looking at a 2-point spread. The Rockets are 2.5-point underdogs. I'm interested about this matchup. I think that there's a really compelling matchup between Sengun and Zion Williamson. Is there anything from this game that you think you might find some interest in?
Can I just say that the Pelicans are my least favorite team to bet on props?
I hate them.
And let me tell you why.
Them.
You know why? Well, because they have 3 guys who could go off any given night, maybe even 4 if you want to count a guy like Trey Murphy. Jonas Valanciunas never starts the second half anymore. If I get one more underdog notification that says Larry Nance has started the second half over Jonas Valanciunas,
it's insane.
I don't know. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And they don't play close games. It's wild. No. They either win by a lot or they lose by a lot. It is just absolutely wild. And their bench is good enough that they don't need to play their starters, and they don't want to, risk injury to Ingram and Zion. So, man, it's tough. But that being said, I think this is an under situation. I mean, I think people look at these teams and see a lot of big names, but at the same time, I do kind of lean to the under. I mean, I don't have a specific guy. Maybe a Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram. He's coming off a big game, but now he's going to have to deal with Dylan Brooks, which just does
Rough.
not seem
Yeah.
like a good time for anyone. And it's tough. I think Zion, it's probably a better game for him. I know the Pelicans' interior defense is good, but I don't think the Rockets really have a good matchup for Zion. I mean, Jabari Smith is good, but he doesn't have the physicality he needs to to hang with Zion when Zion's driving. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Like,
Do you like anything specifically?
yeah, I like Zion, honestly, in this game.
You
I
do.
like him
Okay.
over 22.5 points. I think that the Rockets, like, it's funny because I know Dylan Brooks is great. I think Dylan Brooks is a very good well, let's temper the word great, actually. I'm gonna retract that. Dylan Brooks is an above average NBA defender. I think that I think that it's interesting because the Rockets defense, everybody pointed to the point where they were like, oh, Dylan Brooks went out. I think it was really the point because it was the same time Tari Easton went out. And I think that that goes into that interior defense, like you were saying. I think that this is a great matchup for Zion. It gets you. I'm nervous about Valanciunas because he's gotten into foul trouble in 3 consecutive games against Şengün. So I do think that that could kind of take him off the floor a little bit. Zion's hit this in 3 games in a row against Şengün, 26, 24, 28 points. The line's at 22.5 points. 2 of those 3 games were with both CJ and Brandon Ingram. So I know we have the other high usage guys on the floor. I think it's just one of those spots where it's like Şengün is really good. I question like his athleticism, if that makes sense. Like I think he's excellent, but he's not like the biggest dude. He's not the fastest dude. I think he's like a I don't. It sounds slanderous, but he's almost like Luka at the center position. Like he moves a little bit slower, but he's super skilled. Like he's in that same ilk as like Sabonis, Jokic, that type of player. I think that this is a really rough matchup against a guy like Zion, who just is going to bang. Like he's just going to run through you, whether you're at the 5 or, if it's Jabari Smith, if he's trying to defend him. I think this is a game that really does set up for Zion. And like you said, it's because some of the other matchups for the other guys in the Pelicans are rough. But one of the things that you mentioned before, it's like I got some flack when I put this out on Twitter. It was like since the Harden trade, basically, it was like the Pelicans had the 3rd best net rating in the NBA since the Harden trade. And I like saw that and I was like, there's no fucking way that like they don't feel that good. But then like I watch them and like sometimes I'm like, this team's the best team in the league. And then other times I like watch them and I'm like, I don't understand like these pieces. They don't fit right. Like they don't fit together. Do you think that with the thing with the Pelicans is the fact that they don't really have a real point guard? Because to me, I like look at them and I'm like, I feel like it gets like, especially in close games, like whenever it's a close game, like late, I don't trust them at all because I have no idea who's going to like how you're going to get the ball to your best players. And like, I don't want to like overvalue the point guard position because I think Ingram can obviously get his own shot. CJ can get his own shot. But I think that sometimes like they get into that like Celticsy, like ISO ball, like I'm going to play hero ball. And like Zion, he can handle the ball, he can distribute, but like he's not somebody that you're going to inbound it to and be like, create offense.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to my point. They don't play close games. Like we don't know who, at times who their go-to guy is going to be. I mean, I think you can get away. I think this team is good enough to get away with not having like that true point guard. And I think CJ can be that guy for them potentially. But I do think that when it comes down to it, the ball needs to be in Brandon Ingram's hands.
Yeah.
I think he's their best player. He's the one who could create shots. He could score at all 3 levels, and he could facilitate. I think the evolution for this team is to see him take that step because he's kind of pulled back a little bit since like, the 3 of him, Zion and CJ have like all been playing together on a consistent basis. He'll have his moments, but I think like over his last like 15 games, he's sub 20 points. He should be a 20-point guy for this team. And a lot of that, again, is he doesn't play the 4th quarter in these blowouts. But at the same time, this team's young, and I think they need some experience with these close games. And it's going to be interesting to see, like, who is that guy for them.
Yeah. I'm
It
definitely
was,
fascinated to see. Especially as we get
yeah,
close to the playoffs, because it's like they're going to have to play
yeah,
games. Like there's just no way around it.
yeah, exactly.
One more like tighter game that I wanted to touch on, and that game is well, actually, it's not going to be a tight game, but I just have a prop from it that I like, and it's the Clippers versus the Wizards. Um, Paul George over 6.5 rebounds and assists, I think is one of the craziest lines I've seen. It's minus 135 at Bet365. You can get it as high like minus 140, minus 145, depending on your book right now. He's averaging 9. He's hit this in 84% of games, and the Wizards play fast. Like, am I missing something? Like, am I taking crazy pills? Like, what is this line?
I had to pull up DraftKings just to like see it for myself. It's just a weird line. I mean, I guess the blowout risk and maybe they take down his minutes, that's kind of embedded in this line. But I mean, still, he could hit this easily in 3 quarters.
Yeah.
And it's the Wizards. They play fast. They're terrible defensively. Everyone on the Clippers is going to have a plus matchup. So if when PG passes the ball, that guy's going to immediately be in position to score. It's crazy line, man. I mean, that's there's great value there.
Banana lands. Do you like
Yeah.
anything from this game? Like you said, it's a really soft matchup for the Clippers. Wizards have been fucking ass. So
Yeah, the Wizards are not good. I want to say Harden. I think points and assists right now you can probably get. I think you could get a 27.5. I'm not firing just yet. Yeah, 27.5 at minus 105. I just think this is a game coming off a game where I actually faded him on his points and rebounds line versus the Cavs because of their pick and roll defense.
Great call.
The Wizards are on the opposite of that spectrum. So, I mean, I think this is a great game for Harden to kind of go wild and he plays the beginning. He plays usually the whole fourth quarter. I don't know if they'll need him for the whole fourth quarter, but as good as the Clippers are, I'm assuming he'll start the fourth quarter unless they're up by like 25, which I don't know, man. It's the Wizards. I got to go through this one a little bit more, but I think Harden's in a great spot to produce.
Yeah, I know he's hit this line in all 4 of his last 4 games against the Wizards over the last 2 seasons. All those are from last season, so it's slightly different, obviously, given the team and everything, team context, whatever. But that was realistically dealing with Joel Embiid dropping like 50 every game against the Wizards. So I would imagine that he can get some usage here too. So I think it's definitely a good.
I don't think Mason Plumlee's dropping 50 tomorrow, but maybe. You never know.
Not at all. One game that's going to be, it could be a bloodbath, is the Timberwolves versus the Dallas Mavericks. Luka is out. I think Kyrie Irving has been ruled out. Derek Lively also out. Dante Exum doubtful. Derek Jones Jr. doubtful. When you look at a game like that, what do you like? What number one, like you're just like, okay, Minnesota's going to win, or they should win, but where does like your brain go like when you're like looking, you're like, can I bet something on this? Like, is that a spot that you, because it's like, it's not a, I don't want to call it like beginning of the season or something like that, but it does remind you of some of those games where there's like massive load management and you're like, somebody's going to score. It's just a matter of like, how are we going to get there? Do you think that this is a game that you might target like tomorrow? When you're kind of looking at it, we don't have it. There's really no props out for Dallas players right now. They only have props out for Minnesota, like Gobert, Towns, McDaniels, and Ant. Is that a game where you might look at it and be like, I think I can try to find some real value on one of the Dallas Mavericks?
Yes and no. I mean, it's always going to depend on the numbers that get thrown out.
True.
But where my head goes immediately is who's going to get minutes regardless of if it's a blowout. So like a Tim Hardaway Jr., I don't think he's at risk of missing this game. He could get up 30 shots in this game, but he also, if this game gets out of hand, which it probably will, he probably will be sitting the majority of the fourth quarter, if not the whole fourth quarter. But a guy like Jaden Hardy, who likes to shoot a lot, it's a terrible matchup for him and for anyone pretty much on Dallas. But he might just be a guy who Jason Kidd says, hey, this is your game. Like, we got nobody. We need someone to score. Go out there, do what you got to do. We've seen him get up 20, 25 shots in those load management type situations before. So it's usually like, I'm trying to figure out like who are like the young guys that maybe the coach is just going to ride and, give them that like, game experience no matter what the score is.
Yeah, no, that's the way I look at it. And I think one of the spots that I'm going to look at, depends on the state that you're in. It's one of those stupid things. But like I like turnovers a lot in spots like this because I think that you're getting guys that haven't played a lot. or they're playing in a role that's like so expanded that they're not used to it. So it's like it's one thing if you have a guy and it's like, hey, like go create against the second unit for a couple minutes every game, but it's like, hey, you're gonna go have to create against Jaden McDaniels, Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards. Like, good luck. And then when you get into the inside, you're gonna get Rudy Gobert. So it's like it's definitely a tougher spot. So I'll probably be looking out for some turnover props, especially like I think Hardy's is probably gonna be good. He's probably gonna be like hopefully we get a 2.5. If we get a 2.5, I'm definitely going to hit it. It's probably likely. I think we'll probably see like a 3.5, something like that. But we'll see. I'll let you. We'll put it out there. I'll see if there's something that's actionable from that perspective. But before we,
Love that. I love that angle.
right? Like I think turnovers are such a like fun way to attack like these guys where you're like, I don't know if they can actually be good enough to score 18 points. Like, yeah, they might shoot the ball 30 times, but I don't know if he's going to hit 20 points. Like, I just don't know if it's going to happen because either the defense is so good or they're just not that good. But with turnovers, it kind of is like you're getting this huge opportunity. They're going to be like, even the guys that you're trying to get the ball to aren't as good. So it's like there's so many opportunities for mistakes there. And that's kind of what I like about the turnover prop market. But before we get into pods and recs here, is there any other game on this slate that you think is like interesting at all, or that you had any like final thoughts about? I know like we have the Suns and the Nets, the Magic and the Spurs, the Pistons and the Cavs. So like no like barn burners there, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on any of those before I switch gears for a second.
No, I mean, the Spurs and Magic is interesting because, the Spurs are playing better. They're
A
starting
lot
to
better.
turn up a little bit. Wembanyama's coming off his minutes restriction a little bit, but like the pieces are starting to gel a little bit. While the Magic, I know they had the early season upswing, but it hasn't really worked as much of late for them. So that could be a close game. And it could be, an instance where, some of the Spurs guys who usually don't see the minutes in the fourth quarter in the blowout, we could take advantage of those. Haven't really dug in yet, but just, it's a game that caught my eye for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the player that naturally in my mind like pops is Trey Jones. I think
Mm-hmm.
the mesh and the chemistry that he has with Wemby is so good. And with Wemby seeing more minutes, I think, we've seen Wemby's props like increase, but I think that Trey Jones's have lagged like a touch behind. And I think that might be an angle to kind of attack the Spurs, just saying like this offense is going to be pretty dynamic.
I know you were begging for Trey to be starting with Wemby in the beginning of the season. Now that we got it, it's working, man. You nailed it. I mean, they
Dude,
needed a real point guard. They needed
yeah.
it, and
And
Trey's been good. He's been playing real well.
yeah, dude. And that's the thing. Like, he's a capable point guard. Like, he's good. And like when they traded DeJounte, I was like, oh, like it's because you want to give Trey a little bit more like action, a little bit more run, maybe like him, Keldon Vassell, like whatever. And then like you're seeing him, it's like, oh, like he's pretty legit. Like he's good. So I do like the opportunity there, but appreciate the remembrance there of me just screaming into space. But I forgot before we get to pods and recs, and I asked producer Corey how he's doing. So think about that, Corey. But monotone, fellow guest of the pod, good friend, good guy out there. He asked us what would be like our ideal Knicks trade package. So for those of you that don't know, me and Doug are both huge Knicks fans. Who do you think is the player that you most want to be joining the New York Knicks? And who is a player that you're like, please don't give this guy to me. Like, I don't want to be attached to this guy.
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I think the guy that I want is DeJounte Murray. I don't know how
Okay.
you feel about him. I think I know he wants to probably be the primary point guard, but I do think he would work well next to Jalen, and he's just a good Tibbs fit defensively. I mean, he can D up when he wants to. We need someone to run, we need someone to have his minutes staggered with Jalen to run that second unit. So, I mean, Jalen's minutes are just getting like out of control right now, and
Yeah.
they're going to continue on that route without Julius. So I kind of like DeJounte, and I would give up Grimes and a few
Mm-hmm.
of the first that we have for him. I think he's that piece.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about him.
I think he's Good. I think that there are definitely some concerns about his defense, right? But then when you look at what the Knicks have now, you're like, well, actually, maybe the defense is like going to be like he'll be fine because he's playing alongside like Trey, who sucks, obviously defensively. Jalen's not the best defensive player, but I do think that like when you have like guys like OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, Isaiah Hartenstein, Mitchell Robinson, even Julius Randle, like when he tries, the defensive like intensity can kind of improve and like that can help. So DeJounte definitely gives you some like ball handling. He can shoot now. Like this year, he can suddenly shoot threes, shooting 40%. But I think that he's an interesting player. The player that like I really wanted is I like Malcolm Brogdon. I think the price shouldn't be that crazy. I think that we know that he's comfortable coming off the bench. He's comfortable playing that sixth man role. I think there's a lot of lineups where he could close games as well. The contract's really not that crazy. The only concern with him is like, is he literally going to just explode like at any point because his body is just like an eggshell. Like for lawyers, like we call him an eggshell plaintiff because he's just like a walking injury. So that's my concern with Malcolm Brogdon, but I do really like him. I think he would be like an incredible fit in New York with this team.
I'm a huge Brogdon fan. I mean, I would love that. I would absolutely love that. I was thinking a little bit more long term because I know DeJounte's like on a good contract for a few years, but I mean, I would be absolutely thrilled with Brogdon. We need more. We need another ball handler. We need someone, whether he's coming off the bench or just playing the two. We need someone to kind of run that second unit. So Brogdon would definitely be that guy.
Just a little bit of something. So, all right. Well, at this point now, producer Corey, how are you doing?
I threw my back out.
How?
All right, I didn't throw it out. I slept wrong.
Oh. We're that old, huh?
I'll start right at the top. I recommend a high-quality pillow. The piece of shit I was using clearly has put me out for like 3 days now. I'm on muscle relaxers, full 9, trying to stretch as much as possible. I fucking hate it. Get a nice pillow. Number 2, tax season is upon us. Get your shit in order. Number 3, burn your Brussels sprouts. It's way better.
Oh, yeah, like crisp them? Do you air fry them?
Burn them.
Do you air fry them?
I could, actually.
It's amazing move. Absolutely.
Yeah, I had a roast going, so I just threw it in underneath at the bottom shelf. It's like, that'll be fun.
What kind of roast?
It was like a pork loin, but it was stuffed with shit. I don't know. It was okay. The Brussels sprouts were the best part of the meal.
That's incredible.
Get a pillow, do your taxes, burn your Brussels sprouts.
Those are 3 like very like adult recommendations. Doug,
when you wake up with neck pain, you have to make those kinds of recommendations.
Doug, what do you got for us on the recommendation front?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much time for podcasts personally, just because I am looking at
offense
stats
taken.
all day, every day. No, I listen to you guys. I told Joe I listen to you guys. I can't plug the podcast I'm on. I mean, look, I listen to the Old Man and the Three. I love JJ Redick. I love Zach Lowe stuff. I don't know, man. I'm not that guy to like start throwing out some crazy podcasts that no one's ever heard of.
You have any good soups lately?
I'm not a soup guy, really. I'm not a soup guy.
Man.
Joe is the leader of the soup guys.
Soup, dude.
I know. I've heard. I'm sorry.
You think like he's just constantly squirting out of his ass. Like, do you eat that much solid food, Joe? Is it just kimchi and soup?
I had a salad today for dinner.
Oh wow, look at that!
Yeah,
real solid meal. Stick to your ribs.
It was a Caesar salad with rotisserie chicken in it. I had some croutons. I've been loving these little like Asian sesame sticks, but like I've talked about those before, so I can't get too in the weeds there. I was gonna say, so there's no soups from Doug, but there might be. I don't know. Like, are you watching something? I like. There's got to be one thing that you like, even if it's like.
What else do you do, Doug?
What else do I do? I mean, look, man, I'm job. I'm, try to be a good husband, try to be a good dad. I don't really got too much.
What's your favorite?
That's a good recommendation.
Dinner?
Be a good
What's
dad.
Your favorite dinner?
Yeah, be a good dad.
Boom.
Be a good dad. That's a good one.
My favorite dinner. You know what? Okay, you know what? So, I mean, what we just had, what my wife just cooked up tonight, fantastic. Trader Joe's has this pre-marinated shawarma chicken.
Oh yeah,
delicious.
I've been wanting to try that.
Yeah,
I'll second that.
fantastic. It's fantastic.
Primo.
It tastes like street meat, which if you don't live in New York, you probably are like, what the hell is street meat? But street meat is delicious. It's the meat, the halal carts all over the place. I personally love it.
The best.
But this is like, maybe a bit more clean, refined version of that. So I would go with that.
I fucking love it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
This is what makes us the experts here. We're the professionals. We ask the questions to get the recommendations. So we made it there. My recommendation is going to be mounting like your TV. Like if you have a TV that you've thought about mounting on the wall, just do it. It's so much of a better viewing experience for just like anything. I think that number one, like the perspective that you can get is a lot nicer. So I've done that with my living room, but then I've got one in the man cave that's like directly behind the monitor here, and I haven't mounted it yet. I'm waiting for the mount to come in the mail. And if I had gotten the mount by now, the TV would be high enough that it would be over the monitor, and I would have been able to see the Knicks absolutely kick ass and Josh Hart cash my 65-1 triple double bet. So
hell yeah,
yeah. So
Let's go.
So that would have been what it was. So mount your TVs, because then you're going to be able to like actually see the games. You can get better perspective. You can do a little bit more. And I would recommend getting, depending on the room, I don't think it's always necessary to get the full motion one, but like in the man cave, like it's definitely better because it's like I got the little gym over here, I got the desk studio, and then I got the couch. So you got a little bit more perspective if you get that. If you
have
get
you
the
given
one that
any
has the full
thought
motion.
to a rolling cart like a classroom?
No, dude.
Me picturing you wheeling it around your basement, very funny to me.
on carpet. Like I got the fucking magic school bus. I had one teacher
And just throw a VHS player on there just for looks.
dude.
It's not even plugged in.
in the most stolen valor thing ever. I went to this high school that had junior ROTC, but it was mandatory. So like you had to do it. Like there was no option. Like you just had to be in it.
There's a picture of Joe dressed as a sailor, and there's a bounty that I'm willing to pay if you can get your hands on it. There will be prizes and cash.
It was great. I was I really just I also refused to cut my hair, so that was always this whole thing.
What a rebel.
Yeah, so I remember explaining the math so that was the thing. So we had a naval science professor, and he was a commander in the Navy. And I remember explaining the math to him. I was like, well, you keep giving me an excellent on my uniform every week instead of an outstanding. You said that an excellent is a 93 compared to an outstanding is a 98. Because an outstanding, you can't even give 100 because you said that I'll never give 100 on a uniform because your uniform's never perfect. So I was like, so you're really docking me 5 points, which is a portion of a 10% portion of my grade. And I was like, this is not worth it. I'm not going to cut my hair. And then he didn't know what to say. But the point of this was that they would always play, like whenever they just didn't feel like teaching, they would put fucking Sean Connery and The Hunt for Red October on
No way.
on the TV. I swear to God, that was like the default.
That's insane.
And he would be like, this is about boats. It's about
Was
boats.
it constantly The Hunt for Red October?
Yeah, just all the time.
Like
we would
they
like
never snuck the rock in or something.
Yeah, like you'd probably be like, now in retrospect, and guy was probably just like hungover. He's like, this fucking sucks. Like I'm teaching these kids. Like I thought I retired from this bullshit, and he's teaching kids like trying to collect a second pension, and he's just like, fuck it, I'm gonna put The Hunt for Red October on. So if you haven't watched that movie though, watch it. That's another recommendation for the folks out there. But Doug, before we go, tell everybody where to find you. I think everybody kind of already has an idea, but tell everybody where to find you, where to find your work, and anything else that you want to add out there.
Yeah, you can find me on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at PropBetGuy. You could also find me in the Action app. That's where all my plays go first. Same handle, PropBetGuy. Contributing there with article plays 2-3 times a week. So. Yeah, I mean, all my stuff's free. All my stuff's public. Follow me on both platforms if you don't already. Would appreciate it. But that's all I got.
Got to be done. So guys, make sure that you follow Prop Bet Guy, like and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a review. Actually, those are kind of helpful for us. So definitely give us a review. And make sure to remember that this episode is once again brought to you guys by our good friends at props.cash. You can get 25% off your first month with code Delera25. Like I said, it's one of the most instrumental tools in my process for looking at hit rates, looking at the way the charts are, looking at projections. You can actually see how the line has evolved or how the line has moved over a set of games over the course of the season, because they have a chart that tracks where the prop line is actually closed at. So I think that's always an interesting tool, because you can kind of see just how like, oh, like, is this low compared to where they were normally, or like, is this high compared to where it normally was? And, kind of could be able to track that to tell not only the hit rate, but also how they're projecting it relative to the rest of the games so far this season. And you can get that for 25% off your first month with code Delera25. So thank you, producer Corey. Thank you, Doug. I appreciate you coming on, and let's continue to cash that.